John, welcome to this conversation, and we are really looking forward to having you at ENRich in just a few days. And ENRich is happening at a time when it's just a whole lot of change happening around in the world. So getting your perspectives would be just absolutely brilliant.
Thank you, Anish. I'm certainly looking forward to joining you. I've heard so much about ENRich. As you know, I was disappointed that I couldn't make it there with you last year, but I'm really excited and looking forward to seeing you just next week.
Yes, indeed. And I think there are lots of people who are waiting to hear from you over here. And actually not just here, but across the world, because this will be streamed across the world live. So you will have a big audience. Now, I want to come to what you're going to speak about, and I'm not exactly giving away what you're going to speak about, but just broadly those themes around ESG and energy. And in particular, just to start with, ESG has been, the watermark for us, okay, and for a fairly long time now, the world has been talking actively on ESG. It's waned and waxed a little bit. So which parts are going well as per you, and which parts are could be better?
That's a great opening question, Anish. And let me start with maybe just from a contextual point of view. Well, as you know, at a national level, we now have around about 90%, 90 of global GDP, which is now covered by some form of net zero target. Now, more focused on corporates. When you look at corporates, some 96% of the largest 250 companies in the world now report across ESG or sustainability. And just to put this further in context, that's up from about 64% a decade or so ago. So the extent of the engagement has grown, but so also is the scope of the engagement on ES&G. Now, when you look at the agenda, historically, as we know very well, it's been pretty much entirely, not 100%, but pretty much dominated on the E. But now this is much more broadly across the S and the G. So I'll give you some examples really quickly. So just staying with reporting, as I talked about, the 96% now reporting of the largest 250 companies in the world, we now see new requirements coming through which will place, for example, compliance obligations on the largest companies across the world. So just two as an example, CSDDD, so that's the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. Now, this replaces requirements on businesses to identify, to prevent, and also to remediate human rights related issues as well as environmental related issues. And that's really important when we think about the energy transition, which is happening right now, is how do we actually make that energy transition happen in a way right through the supply chain, which is also considering aspects of the S. And I'll give you another one as an example. EUDR, lots of acronyms. So this is the EU's deforestation regulation. Again, this requires a due diligence statement and supporting data, but now this will be data which demonstrates that products are deforestation free and not linked to forest degradation. So again, when we look through the E, the S and G, we see this expanding, this broadening out of regulations and reporting. Now, the reason why I focus initially in on reporting is we know, don't we, that reporting drives transparency and fundamentally drives action. And there are many, many more examples of voluntary positive change outside of that which is compliance driven. But as for the other part of your question, because you also asked in your niche about things that maybe are not going quite as well, we have, I think it's true to say, we have observed some pullback in the level of commitment and action. And I'll highlight two key reasons for this. One, which is really around the recognition that some previously stated initiatives are maybe harder to achieve than initially thought. So here we're seeing a calibration in terms of the timing or the approach, but fundamentally with the same overall outcome in mind. And the second piece, which is really hotly debated, especially when we consider in the US the elections going on now, is really the politicization of this area. Even the term ESG itself is highly politicized. And we see situations, don't we, where politicians are pushing back on ESG, including action on climate change and energy transition, even while the jurisdictions that they're responsible for are being ravaged by extreme weather caused by climate change. So we see this contradiction. The last point I will end before I come back to you is that, however, it is encouraging to see that the vast majority of companies are continuing to drive action on ESG through the long term, through driving sustainable value. And this was highlighted in our latest CEO Outlook, which confirmed that 69% of CEOs are keeping the same climate-related strategies, but they've altered how they talk about this to meet stakeholder needs. So it's a mixed bag. There's definitely lots of progress, but there's some challenges that we need to lean into and continue to push through.
So you mentioned about the difficulty with the word ESG. Now, is sustainability a more acceptable word or more universally acceptable word to most of the world?
Short answer is yes. For today, but you know the world is changing, and especially with social media, things are changing so quickly. Anish, I remember being actually just in January of this year in Davos, attending a meeting with Al Gore, and at the time, you remember many years ago, he talked about the inconvenient truth, didn't he? And he talks about climate change. He couldn't reference climate change back then, but he can now. So at the moment, the term sustainability is more acceptable. But I really stress when I speak to clients and I speak internally, let's just focus less on the labels and more on the underlying action.
Right. So even if we take that a more acceptable word, sustainability, it means so many things. It's such a broad term. What does it mean for you personally?
I'll sum it up for me. 2 words: balance and fairness.
Oh, wow.
That's what sustainability means to me, really simply. But
I polled our next generation, and the biggest thing that came out is balance. So
that's absolutely right. And for me, when I elaborate on this, this means a balance and fairness in the interactions that we have with the environment, considering the planet's finite resources and ensuring that we're not taking out more than we're putting back in. But it's also balance and fairness in our interactions with each other, ensuring diverse, inclusive, but also safe and fair work practices based on the fundamental belief in the dignity and the rights of others. And finally, for me, it's balance and fairness in corporate governance, ensuring that our businesses are governed with transparency, but also due consideration, not only just to shareholders, but also to the broader stakeholders in society. So balance and fairness for me is really at the heart of this.
So keeping that in mind, if corporates have to index certain actions, say in the next year, okay, or they have to draw up a FY25 agenda, or a calendar year 25 agenda, what would be your biggest advice to them?
I would say biggest advice: get your data in order. That's the biggest advice. So when I talk about things like CSDDD, there's so many acronyms, Anish, as you know. I talked about EUDR, there's CSRD, the SEC disclosure requirements coming through. All of these require huge amounts of data. Just a reference point, just for CSRD, over 1,000 data points. So we need data, we need to ensure that there is good controls around that. So you've got certainty of the quality of that data so that you can report and you can do so in a way with confidence. But beyond the reporting doesn't exist just for itself. is really about driving change. So beyond the reporting, you can then lean into elements of those parts of your business right through the whole value chain to drive change. So get your data in order, I think is really important. And what I would say, look, if we're not thinking about this strategy, you need to do this now, because if not, we know that your competitors are, and CEOs are telling us, fundamentally, they're concerned that if they fail to respond to this, they may lose a competitive edge. So get your data in order, make sure you don't lose a competitive edge, and lean into this change, because there will be winners and there will be losers. So the question is, do you want to be a winner or do you want to be a loser?
That's sharp. Okay, so going on from data, and my last 1 year has been working on data and AI, and I'm not from that background, except that it just happened for all of us, and at least my team and I embraced it fully, wholly. This time, ENRich agenda is the headline is AI and energy. Okay, so that's what we are doing. So if you're talking of data, the first thing which comes to my mind is how can we use AI to make the best of that data? So from an ESG standpoint or a sustainability agenda standpoint, how is AI having an influence?
So I posed a similar question and wrote on the board, Anish, AI equals E, comma, S, comma, and G, discuss. And that was it. Because for me, AI at the heart, it is E, S, and G. It's E in terms of ensuring clean energy use for this growing demand for the compute power for the needs of AI. So that's really important. But it's also S. It's ensuring that there's management around the risk associated with fundamental degree of bias, which can be fed into large language models. I was reading a report a little while ago, and I didn't know this. This is quite interesting. There's some almost 3,000 languages spoken in the continent of Africa alone. And we know, and you know, of course, I've got a history, not as long a history as yourself, working in India. Just the diversity of the language and the dialects along the coast within India, but these LLMs are primarily in one language. And when we talk about this, the open source nature of it, it isn't really as open as we see. It's primarily dominated by the West and in English. So there's a whole piece around the S and ensuring that there's no bias in the products which are being produced. And G is about the stewardship, the ethical use of AI. AI, after all, is a tool. If we take this in the most basic sense, if we think of a hammer, you can use a hammer skillfully to make a beautiful piece of furniture, but you can also use a hammer to cause damage. So what we need to do through the governance is ensure that this fantastic tool with huge potential is used in the right way for the good of mankind.
That's a beautiful metaphor to use, the hammer. And I'll remember that, a good consultant always remembers those good things which one can, use in other places to make impact. How is KPMG driving impact in this area?
Yeah, so fundamentally, the impact that we drive, Anish, is through the work that we do, you and I do with our clients. So first and foremost, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, are we well equipped? Are we best equipped to support our clients? So that means in driving training. So we have training across the E, across the S, and the G available to all 270,000 members of our staff. It also means detailed and specific training, whether this be for our 90,000 auditors to ensure that they can drive ESG assurance accordingly in line with those standards that I talked about. And it means continuing to invest and to partner with our clients, with NGOs, and also with academic institutions, because this whole area is evolving so quickly. So when you and I talk about AI, and AI as a means to accelerate energy transition and using IoT infrastructure, people are literally building this, aren't they, as they go. So we need to continue to invest in our staff and connect with the thought leaders around the world. But in addition to doing this so that we can support our clients, we're also working as best we can to ensure, there's a term we use a lot, that we walk the walk ourselves in terms of our energy use, in terms of us reducing waste, and also in terms of the societal elements that we're driving forwards, ensuring that we're giving back to the communities that we serve. So what we're doing is equipping ourselves to support our clients, and then also ensuring that we do the very best we can to walk the walk ourselves.
Right, John. Thanks so much. And I just wanted to make a couple of mentions. You mentioned about the AI not having biases, or at least being more democratic than just the use of a single language. You're going to come to India. India has a large number of native language models which are coming up, large language models which are coming up. And I really love that, because there's richness in those languages which needs to be captured and should not be limited because we are adopting AI. And the second thing is that in our own work in AI, and my own work in AI and energy, what we're trying to do is make sure that it's democratic. It's empowering rather than disempowering. It should not deprive people, it should empower people. And that's exactly what we are working on. Now, that's what we're going to talk about at ENRich. So we're looking forward to having you, John, with us, and I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful 2 days together.
Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to being there also. I'll see you soon.